This podcast is made possible by Avalara and Ledge.
Hi, it's Tony Bohr, CFO of Blackbaud, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 997.
When you're using data to make decisions and using data to help focus the team, everybody on the team, around what really matters, but you have to abstract back from that and find the 4 or 5 data points that really matter. The outcomes that I really obviously am focused on are revenue growth, profitability and return on capital. But those are outcomes. Those are the things that happen, as a result of all the work that's going in, all the important and wonderful work that's going into building the products, deploying them and serving our clients, and pricing them right and hiring the right people, and all the resource allocation decisions that we're making. So the key is to create KPIs that are the 4 or 5 things that matter right now, that if we get those right, we know it will lead to the revenue growth, profitability, and return on capital targets that we've set for ourselves.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Daniel Bisgeier, CFO of Constellation. When asked to reflect on his career, Daniel Bisgeier tells us that significant progress often doesn't come in bursts, but through persistent effort over time and constant refinement. To illustrate his answer, Bisgeier takes us back to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, when as a CFO, he foresaw an urgent need for liquidity. What began as a response to the crisis became a transformative chapter for his company, leading to more sustainable operations. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. You know the feeling. A report deadline is looming, and your team is buried in spreadsheets with tasks like bank and payment processor reconciliations, journal entry prep, and cash flow reporting. But what if there was a better way? Ledge automates the tedious work that slows your team down, like high-volume transaction matching, journal entry creation, and even cash flow forecasting. Ledge glues all of your financial data together across your ERP, banks, payment processors, data warehouse, and more, and automates any workflow, no matter how complex or unique to your business. Get real-time cash flow visibility and make cash reporting and forecasting effortless while increasing controls and accuracy. And Ledge requires no IT or R&D resources. Ledge plugs right into your existing stack, so you can get set up in just a few hours. Imagine a world where your team can close the books faster with fewer resources. Imagine audit-ready data all year round. With Ledge, you can finally stop scaling headcount just to keep up with growth. Visit ledge.co, that's ledge.co, to learn more about how you can automate your finance operations without the heavy lift. Hello, we're speaking with Daniel Bisgeier, CFO of Constellation. Daniel, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
So Daniel, as we always do, we're going to ask you to look back in time for us. We're wondering about your professional journey and what were those experiences you feel prepared you to become a finance leader. What comes to mind for you?
Thank you. Yeah, I started my career as in investment banking. Out of college, I was an analyst in the M&A department at Goldman Sachs, and I was assigned to the Procter & Gamble team. I spent a day a week pretty much in Cincinnati working with Procter & Gamble, and I see that first experience, I did that for about 2 years, as a really formative experience for me that prepared me for the rest of my career, including the CFO role. It was a great experience for a couple reasons. Number one, as a young analyst in the M&A department at Goldman Sachs, working on a bunch of intense projects and long hours, was really a great training ground to learn the fundamentals of finance, accounting, valuation. Had some great mentors and teachers, there at Goldman Sachs and worked with some really smart people. So there was after a year and a half or 2 years of that, it's a boot camp as far as some of the fundamentals of accounting and finance and the capital markets. And then number two, I was lucky enough to work with a great client. At the time, Procter & Gamble was doing a brand divestiture program. So we spent a lot of time with their teams, understanding how they think about their business, how they think about their brands, how they measure and track success of their brands. As a world-class consumer products company, it was also a boot camp at how a company like that and how a really well-managed company like that approaches their business. So after a couple years doing that, it was, I came out with a lot more, knowledge and exposure, than I had coming in. And I think that really prepared me for the rest of my career. I stayed in finance, after that stint with Procter & Gamble in different roles, including as an investor. I spent many years at JP Morgan, another, world-class market-leading company, in a group there, which is called the securities portfolio. And that group at JP Morgan helped manage JP Morgan's interest rate risk and liquidity risk. And I was part of a big global team that helped invest excess deposits in various instruments. And that was another great experience for me to understand, how a big, well-managed, highly regulated company is able to approach and manage around, a very difficult set of problems and risks. And I was one part, again, of a great team. And so having exposure to, the people there, the processes that were put in place and seeing how they were implemented, I think, was also really important. In both cases, I was working with or for really large companies. And so I got to see sort of how companies that have been really successful deploy things at scale. Since then, I've worked in smaller organizations that are building towards that scale. And so it's great to have kind of a destination for where you're headed, and to see the kinds of processes and procedures that you need and the kinds of disciplines that you need to be able to operate at scale. And then obviously you have to make sure you adapt and implement those in a way that works for a company that's, on its journey to hopefully get there.
During your investment banking period, and again, it spans about 15 years, you really think of yourself as an investor along the way. Somewhere there, was it a deliberate decision, or you become more postured as an investor? Am I wrong? Correct me. What was your thinking?
Well, yeah, when I started out, I was helping. I was part of an advisory team, so we would advise our clients on major corporate transactions and oftentimes M&A transactions. And the role there of the investment banker is to help companies navigate a really important corporate process, to help them understand different valuation metrics for their company, actually run that process, provide advice to the board and the management team in terms of decision making. As I stayed in finance, but changed roles in finance. And at JP Morgan, for example, the role of this team in the securities portfolio, part of the role was to invest assets that, if somebody deposits $100 in a checking account, call it $70 maybe lent out in terms of mortgage loans and commercial loans and credit card loans. But every bank keeps excess deposits on hand in case for a rainy day, in case they need it for liquidity. Our job, this team's job at JP Morgan, is to invest those dollars in various safe assets, around the world. And so, my role there and as a part of a larger team was to help make those investment decisions. As an advisor to a company, it's great exposure to the board and CEOs and see how companies are making decisions. As an investor, what's great about being an investor is that you really have to learn and focus. You have to learn to focus on the key value drivers for a company, what really creates value for either a company or a security. And as an investor, you have to learn to really understand what are the key metrics you have to follow, how to track what direction they're headed, so that you can really understand and predict what's going to happen with the key value drivers behind any instrument or any company. And so being an investor, it's a different approach, than being an advisor, because you have to make decisions about where to deploy assets. And so you really establish a really strong discipline for trying to understand, what's going to happen tomorrow based on the trends that you're seeing today and in the past. Being an investor is great, although when I thought about it, I think about it. It's sort of, in one sense, being an investor, you're on the sidelines watching a game very carefully and predicting what the score is going to be. And so, you really have to learn to understand what's going to drive, that outcome. But what I love about the role I have now as CFO is that, as an operator, you're sort of on the field helping determine that outcome. And so all those disciplines, that I learned in the first phase of my career, you kind of apply in a different way as an operator when you're on the field helping to hopefully lead and drive the team in the right direction.
I want to ask you about that first chapter of your career at Goldman Sachs.
As you observed C-suite members in that first 6 years, does anything surprise you about the nature of business? Is it, again, not who you are today and not who you were at Morgan Stanley, but who you were at that place in time when you first stepped through the door? You had a copy of Liar's Poker in your back pocket. Exactly. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd say, what I remember the most about that experience was, I think the intensity of the intensity of the work and the quality of the people that I worked with. A lot of really smart people working very hard to, to provide the best advice to our clients. And it's intense, as expected, intense and long hours. But that's what allows you to learn so quickly. So when I look back on that, I really remember just, everybody that I worked with and worked around, and I was, lucky to have some really great mentors there, were extremely, intense, aggressive, intelligent, and demanding. And to me, that was I expected that, but it was a great environment to be in. I'd say what, surprised me in terms of the way, business operated, I think was the speed and decisiveness of decision-making sometimes, at the C-suite for the companies that we're advising. I came in with a very analytical approach, and, you can take a problem that you want to solve and think about the million different variables that might go into it and the various different paths that it can go down. And sometimes you can come up with lots of different possible scenarios that, and then you're trying to sort of guide decision-making. What I very quickly understood was that when you get in the boardroom, that group in the boardroom wants clear advice and make a decision quickly. And they would, and they don't need to, you don't need to get from 98 to 100% in terms of every little, analytical road you can go down. You want to really focus on the most important variables and they want to make a decision based on what's most important fast. And so that was something I learned pretty quickly, which was, boy, you got, one shot to provide your advice and one shot to provide the data behind it that you think is going to be convincing. And those executives in that room or that board is going to very quickly make a decision and not look back.
Great insight there for us. Thank you.
Let's fast forward to JP Morgan.
When you're there a number of years, when it's time to move on, recruiters have been calling you for several years now, possible CFO roles that you could step into. Ultimately, why do you choose the company you step into?
Yeah, no, it was a tough decision to leave. Again, JP Morgan's a great company. Worked again with great people. And when it came time to move, I guess I've always thought of career moves sort of this way, which is, am I going to be in a role where I can, where I'm part of a company, an opportunity that I believe in, and I moved to a smaller company in a fast growing area, in digital marketing software, which was and continues to be a fast growing area. But the way I thought about it was, is this a company I believe in? Number one. Number two, am I going to be working with people that I want to work with and can continue to learn from, and a team that I want to be a part of? And number three, can I be in a role where I think I can have an impact? And so when it was time to move, was looking for an opportunity that met all those criteria. And that's, I think, a good set of criteria that I've used, throughout my career to make sure that, I'm working on something that I believe, can grow and create value. That I'm, working with people that I want to come to work with and sometimes go to battle with every day. And number three, where I hopefully can be in a role where I can have an impact.
I forget if you mentioned, was it a recruiter who ultimately helped you, or was it through your own networking?
When I left JP Morgan, it was through my own personal network. The team that I joined were people that I knew very well, and I'd been sort of following the progress of the company, for a while. And so I was joining a team that I knew well, and an opportunity that I was familiar with, and it was through my personal network.
And I should mention, you step into the CFO role at a company called MediaMath, and you are the CFO, but you're also the chief investment officer. And here too, we see the role of the investor remains part of your story. Am I overstating that, or how do you look at it?
No, in a few of the roles that I've had, there have been a couple elements to it. Number one is the traditional roles of being a CFO, leading a finance team, financial operations, helping a company navigate its capital structure, deploying resources internally. But in each of those cases, part of the strategy of the company was also to deploy capital outside of, the company's walls. In one case, at MediaMath, we built, a venture fund to help seed and grow companies in the digital marketing ecosystem. And so helping, develop and deploy that, was a key part of the role. And at my next company after that, M&A was a major part of our roadmap. And so, in both raising and deploying capital and potential acquisition targets was a key part of the role. So in each of those cases, the background and experience as an investor was both relevant to the experience coming in and also relevant to the part of the mandate when I was there.
Well, Daniel, we may have a few more career-related questions for you a little later in the mentoring round, but right now let's find out about Constellation. Tell us about this company. What is it about today, and what are its offerings?
Yeah, so I've been at Constellation since the beginning of January, and I'm really excited to be here. We really focus on three main areas: data, content, and compliance. And so we have a content platform that allows us to, I guess the best way to put it is instantly create really beautiful digital assets, that are always compliant with legal and brand requirements, and that our clients can deploy, instantly and at scale across a bunch of different channels. And so we have clients that license that platform for different uses. We're really strong in automotive, in healthcare, and in insurance. You think about highly regulated industries that have really important requirements around whether it's a digital ad or a brochure, the assets that they're going to deploy. We build a software platform that makes it really fast and easy for them to do that and have those assets work in different environments and look really good, and really work well for whether it's marketing or internal marketing or whatever they're being used for. So we have clients that license that platform, and we help in some cases clients deploy those assets through the platform. And then we also have a data and analytics business where we essentially have deployed AI tools to build a data analytics platform that takes first-party data, or in other words, data that our clients' own data that only they have access to, combine it with insights from publicly available data, and create an insights platform for our clients, that is using kind of the best tools available and that is unique to them and their data. And so we're deploying both. Clients are licensing both. They're separate products, but they are complementary. And because as you look down the road, the purpose of a data analytics platform is to really understand what's going on in the hearts and minds of your clients and customers. And the purpose of a content platform is to help create and deploy assets that reach the right people with the right messages where they want to be. And so And so that's what we do. Like I said, we are really strong in the automotive sector, in the healthcare sector, and in the insurance sector. It's a dynamic founder-led company with a lot of growth ahead of it. So I've been here for 3 months, part of a really strong team, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Daniel, we know you've only been there a short time, but we always like to ask for a history lesson in terms of the company's capital structure. Can you look back in time for us a little bit and tell us how this company got established from a capital structure point of view?
Yeah, Diana Lee, our founder, founded the company herself, bootstrapped it for many years. And at the end of 2022, we raised a round of capital from Newlight, our private equity sponsor. So we've raised one round of capital, but essentially the company's been bootstrapped. And so what's one thing that's great about Constellation is the disciplines that are required to bootstrap a company, and without raising a lot of capital, are kind of embedded in how we operate, which is really which is great and really sets us up well to be capital efficient.
Which brings us to sort of the chapter that you're perhaps here to open. Can you tell us? I mean, you joined this company for a reason. You're going to help it take that step towards its next chapter of growth. What is the title of that chapter?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, we are poised to take this company to a different level of scale. For really two reasons. Number one, as we're able to deploy our software, our content software across new verticals, there's a huge market opportunity for us in each of the verticals that requires a different set of, requires us to build vertical specific teams in some cases, requires, a discipline to be able to, have pricing and packaging and maybe some software tweaks that are unique and specific to each vertical. So it requires a verticalization strategy, but each one, has a huge one. We've sort of proven the product market fit in these verticals, and we see a huge market opportunity in each one. So we're going after it. And as we're deploying our data platform and licensing our data platform, that opens up with the same set of clients and also new sets of clients, another product that we're bringing to market. So what I see my role here, number one, is to help build help to build and deploy disciplines internally that will allow us to scale, make decisions at scale, financial analysis that allows both our founders and key stakeholders, but also empowers leaders in the business to understand what's going on with their business, their vertical, and make decisions and resource allocation decisions, and also make sure that we're thinking through our capital strategy so that we have the resources we need to scale, if and when we want to kind of put our foot on the gas in terms of, investing resources in building out teams faster, M&A, whatever it may be.
Finance would be looking to create more visibility on the product level, given your emphasis that you just placed on it. You have to understand how these products are being accepted. What's the customer experience? Is part of what you're up to making certain those metrics are humming along, meaning the data's sound and you're getting the visibility you require, or what would you tell us?
100%. So we have a lot of great data here at Constellation. The team collects a ton of data about how our platform is being used. And so part of what I'm doing is number one, making sure we continue that, especially as we're developing and deploying new kinds of products. And number two, making sure that we can make sense of that data and translate that data into insights. And so, one of the things I mentioned was, making sure we have tools so that leaders around the company understand what's happening with their vertical and can help make decisions. One of those key tools are making sure we have simple, clear KPI dashboards, that allow us to understand exactly how different kinds of customers use our platform, what their life cycle is like, what the cost to serve those customers is, all in. When, how often and when we might need to bring on more resources in order to serve more clients. And so we're again, the company's got a great foundation for that. And the finance team and I are helping to take all that data and make sense of it in a way so that we can kind of track those insights over time, and make the right decisions about where to deploy our resources. We've got the data. To me, it's about first making sense of it, and then number two, simplifying it in a way so that leaders around the company actually use it to make decisions. It's, step one might be you come up with a KPI dashboard that's got 1,000 lines on it, and you're going through all the different data analytics and seeing what's there. But what really matters is distilling that into a few key pieces of data that we can talk to with leaders around the company, on a weekly basis, so it drives and helps decision making.
And that's really an interesting discussion, I would imagine, when you've got to narrow it down to those four, because you realize if we put 5 and 6 up there, it could be a distraction. We need to get a really sharp focus for the next quarter on these four. How am I doing? Is that part of the discussion ever? Or, is there ever a number that you thought was perhaps a distraction? Too much emphasis on it, or it doesn't mean what it looks like it means unless you have these other two numbers on top of it. I don't know. I'm just trying to get a flavor of what happens here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When you have a lot of data that you're analyzing, right, the first instinct is to create, is to create very complex analysis around it. And there's always exceptions, and there's always, underneath any piece of data, there might be sub-trends that you got to kind of find and track. And I think that's a useful process to go through that exercise, because then you really understand what's happening. But to your point, when you're using data to make decisions and using data to help focus the team, everybody on the team, around what really matters, you have to sort of, it's important to do that first, but you have to abstract back from that and find the 4 or 5 data points that really matter. And that's exactly right. It's the ones that, if we nail these 4 or 5 things, as a CFO, the outcomes that I really obviously am focused on are revenue growth, profitability, and return on capital. But those are outcomes. Those are the things that happen, as a result of all the work that's going in, all the important and wonderful work that's going into building the products, deploying them, and serving our clients, and pricing them right, and hiring the right people, and all the resource allocation decisions that we're making. So the key is to create KPIs that are the 4 or 5 things that matter right now, that if we get those right, we know it will lead to the revenue growth, profitability, and return on capital targets that we've set for ourselves. And that is an iterative process. It's not the same all the time. As you pointed out, your priorities as a company may change. One day it may be, let's add more auto dealers, to our network. You might for a quarter be focused on, let's think about upsells in terms of, as far as our, average value per customer, let's make sure we're really focused on upsells. The key drivers you may want to emphasize this data point or that data point, depending on kind of what's happening in your business today, which is why you got to look at the broad spectrum. But, that's what we do. It's an iterative process to make sure we understand, what do we care about the most right now? How do we measure it? And how do we make sure that we're setting goals around it so that everybody can rally around it and drive towards that outcome?
Would you anticipate by the end of 2024 to have between 1 and 3 additional predictive metrics, numbers that could help people gauge better how to allocate capital by predicting where the future might be?
I sure hope so. I mean, so we're really doing a couple things here. So one is taking the data that we have and seeing figuring out what some of the predictive metrics may be based on looking at the past. Because again, we have a lot of data, and there are some insights in there that we're going to find, and we're finding. And then number 2, like you said, as we deploy, as we innovate our product, and both deploying new features on our platform, taking it to market in different ways, and deploying our data platform, understanding what are the key predictors of success for a client are going to be really critical. So that's why looking at the client life cycle is really important. That's why looking at how they adopt and use our product as a predictor of success is, really important. Um, and we're going to continue to sift through the metrics to see which are the most predictive.
Want to just quickly touch on AI with you. Can you provide us with some insight into the company's strategy for adopting and integrating AI technologies into its operations? How is it going to use AI? Maybe that's how I should ask the question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're using AI now. We've got a really, our product and engineering team. We've got a great AI leader here who, and we're deploying AI today in a couple different ways. On our data platform, we're using, the LLM models that are out there to help essentially, again, take, data that we and our partners have access to, first party data, unique data, combine it with publicly available data, and then use these amazing AI tools to help and deploy them in a way so that our clients can get insights from those combined data sets. And those tools, those AI tools, allow them to generate insights quickly, efficiently. I mean, in all the ways that you and I might use ChatGPT on the web. They can use a version of that that's unique to them and unique to their data, so that they can get insights that you couldn't get from the web, but using the same kinds of tools. So we think that's going to be really powerful and really interesting. We're also using AI in our content platform. So, an example of that, you could imagine, an ad for a certain car where the background, the car, we'll get, there's lots of requirements around what the picture of the car and the offer that you're showing with that car, matches an actual vehicle you have in your inventory. But the background to that, if it's the winter or it's it's an off-road vehicle, you can put a different background on it than if it's a sports car. And AI tools can help that kind of background visualization in ways that are, really powerful, or help different dealers groups, put their own stamp on some of these stock images. And so we're deploying that through our creative platform as well. So AI is now today integrated into our product set. And so, we obviously continue to refine how it's deployed and used, but we're taking it to market now. And we think it's going to be a really powerful tool for us.
Is there a place for AI among your FP&A team? Does it have a seat at the table now in your FP&A meetings?
We talk about it. It's not, I wouldn't say we've integrated it yet into our FP&A processes. But you could, we talk about how we might be able to deploy it. Right now, our focus on AI is really making sure we're delivering it to our clients and helping us create value for them. But a lot of conversation about where AI might help us, might help companies like ours, from an FP&A perspective. But we haven't yet folded it into, our forecast updates or our budget planning, or our, billings and collections, or any of those processes. Right now, we're not using it. It's interesting, those are areas, and certainly, especially in some of those areas where, certainly in the financial operations area where, at least for me, I wouldn't be comfortable deploying AI till I'm really certain and clear that there aren't going to be mistakes we can't predict or track, right? So you got to, so that may not be the first place I would want to test it. Maybe you test it somewhere else before you deploy it, kind of on the line in some of those areas. But it's certainly something that's coming. So we'll get smarter about it.
Okay, well, we're up to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask you to look back in time during the course of your career, where your lines of sight into the organization allowed you to see something, opportunity, or maybe it was a risk and something that you responded to. Again, it might have been during your investment banking days, something you brought to the attention of a client. It might have been last week. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll start by saying oftentimes I felt like the most progress that I've made as a leader, don't necessarily come in bursts like that. They come through, persistent effort over time, and constant refinement and improvement. But that said, one moment that does come to mind, there are times where you can kind of try and make a quick step change in something. And, one thing that comes to mind was, when I was at MediaMath, it's a working capital intensive business. When COVID hit, there was a real change in terms of the demand environment. And as we were thinking about, we had arrangements with people that paid us where the timing of those payments, might not have been ideally synced to the timing of the people that we had to pay. And so as we were in a difficult market environment, it was clear that we wanted to make sure we had kind of backup plans in case we needed more liquidity. And so, that was a moment where it was like, look, everybody's faced with the same issues now. Our working capital arrangements sometimes can be a drain on liquidity. Let's use this moment to transform those arrangements and create liquidity through refactoring our payment terms with the people we're paying and the payment terms with the people that are paying us, so that it's not a drain on our liquidity. And so we went out and identified vendor by vendor and had those conversations to say, look, we got to make a change. And given the environment that we're in, it's critical that we make a change. And we did it. And we were, it wasn't. Some conversations were easier than others, but we were able to drive significant incremental liquidity and change in our working capital dynamics by going out there and sort of making a hard change. And it was the difficult environment that sort of led to the sort of impelled us to say, we got to do it. And we got to do it right now. But what we found is that when we went out and did it, it was effective. And lasting. You change your contract and then it didn't go back when the environment got better.
This episode is presented by Avalara. That's the sound of not worrying about sales tax compliance. Because when you automate it with Avalara, you don't have to worry about collecting sales tax or tracking who and what is tax exempt. With Avalara, you don't even have to worry about new tax laws and regulations. Avalara does it for you. If your business sells internationally, Avalara has you covered with cross-border tax compliance solutions. And when it comes time to file tax returns, Avalara automatically takes care of that too, giving you one less thing to worry about. Avalara has managed billions of sales for small, mid-size, and enterprise businesses, and seamlessly works with your current sales, e-commerce, and accounting platforms. Take the worry out of tax compliance with Avalara. Learn more at avalara.com. That's AVALARA.com.
Right, we're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round, where I'm going to ask you to look back again. We're going to take you back to MediaMath. We want you to think about that first 30 or 60 days you stepped in to a CFO role. Again, it had to have been quite a change for you. You left JP Morgan to join and step in there. There must have been something you're scratching your head saying, I wish someone had told me this. We're going to give you a pass. You get to go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice. This is the advice you wish someone had given you that you just didn't realize part of some aspect of the job. Anything for us?
Well, one thing I think is just to be, this sounds a little cliche, but be ready for change. You spend a lot of time, building your plan for the year and your budgets and your targets and your workforce plan behind it and your resourcing plan behind it. And it's important, by the way, that you always continue to manage to those targets. But your priorities are going to change. The team that you have is going to change. The business environment's going to change. And being nimble and flexible is really important, and being ready for it and kind of embedding it into your finance process so that, how often you're reforecasting your budget, how often you're reforecasting your revenues, at least internally, the tools you're using for managing your headcount, making sure that you're not tied to a plan that you put in place 3 months ago that may no longer be relevant, making sure that you have the right partnership with different leaders around the business to understand how their priorities and needs are changing based on what you thought a few months ago. Again, it sounds like, of course, things change quickly. Everyone knows that. but they really do, and making sure that being ready for it and being prepared for it, making sure that your processes anticipate it so that you build kind of flexibility into how you think about decision making is really important. And I mean that in really specific ways. It's the it's the way it's the process you use for who you're going to hire and what your budget is around it. It's the process you use for how you think about your cost structure for the rest of the year. You got to update those things fast. You got to be ready to take in new inputs, and you got to have a process that allows for that.
Daniel, we'd like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side with us. We're wondering if there's something most people don't know about you, something maybe your colleagues don't even know about you. Anything come to mind that you could share with us?
Let me think about that. Well, look, I was a Little League baseball coach. I've been a Little League baseball coach for many years. I don't know if people here know that. I'm taking this summer off because my middle kid has aged out of where I can be an effective coach. I can coach the young ones really well, but they very quickly get to an age where they need a better coach than me. But my daughter, who will pick up softball, I'll coach her again. But I love it. I love being out there on the field with the kids. I love baseball, and I will say I've had a bunch of different jobs. Coaching Little League, third graders in Little League baseball may be the toughest one of all.
Or is it managing the parents? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I'm sure it's part of it. What about a book? Would you have a book you'd like to recommend for us?
There's a book, as far as a business book, there's a book called, I'm not the first one to make this recommendation, but I will endorse it. It's called Business Adventures by John Brooks. I think it had popped up on a list that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett had recommended. So it comes well recommended by some folks that have been, wildly successful, but it's a great book. It was written a long time ago. It's sort of, I think, 12 chapters, different.
Why did it speak to you? You've come across lots of business books.
I know the stories it told. There was one. I mean, I don't remember them all in detail, but one about the Ford Edsel, one about Xerox. There was one about a market crash. It's really well researched and well written. It talks through different business problems and just gives you really great insight into into what these problems were and sort of what happened. I think it's the quality of the research and the writing. But it's really great. The other thing that I like to read that I think is great to read from a business perspective there are some annual letters that certain CEOs write that I think make for great reading. Warren Buffett's, obviously, that one gets a lot of press. It's great to read. But in the banking sector, I spend a lot of time covering financial institutions. Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan, always writes a great annual letter just to how a successful CEO thinks about the economic environment, the market environment, the business. A kind of a comprehensive tour of those things is always really insightful. There was the late CEO of M&T Bank, Robert Wilmers, used to write some really insightful letters, especially after the financial crisis that were insightful. And so some of those annual letters, you get to see how really effective CEOs think about their businesses in the context of the larger business environment. Can be really good reading.
That's a great. Thanks for pointing that out to us. We hear about some of the names you mentioned when they come out, but you have to imagine there's quite a few that are just not going to get on different people's radar, and how they talk about business and how they talk about the challenges and the promises is something that generally doesn't get reported on. So that's would make an interesting book. Even going back in history, I think it was a Welsh at GE was people used to gather around when his letter came out. But great insight. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was at going back to maybe the beginning, I remember when I was in training in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, we had a training session around how to look at a 10K. A 10K is like, an annual report that companies file, with the SEC. And usually attached to the 10K is the annual report the companies file for their shareholders. And I remember in that training session, the person who was training us said, the first thing you should, and these reports have all the financial data and all the disclosures and, lots of technical stuff that's, that we would be wading through. But they said the first thing you should do is read the CEO's letter. because that's going to give you the best insight in terms of clues, in terms of where the business is going, what the key priorities are, how the management team feels about the business, and it will provide a frame for the rest of those numbers that you can't get anywhere else. And I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. We are up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally the next 12 months. We'd like to know what your priorities are as CFO of Constellation.
Yeah, number one priority is to help support the growth that help support the growth that this company's got in front of it. We've got a really strong team and a great opportunity. And so, my job as a finance leader is to make sure that the finance team here provides the resources, tools, and insights for the leaders around the business to support and drive that growth. More specifically, what are the priorities? What does that mean? I think it's some of the things we talked about. It's making sure that we have the right few KPIs that we're managing around that are focused on the most predictive metrics for the key priorities for the business. Number one. Number two, it's making sure that we have the resources deployed around the areas of with the biggest opportunity. Number three, making sure that we have tools that leaders around the business are familiar with and can use to help make those decisions. In some cases, that's financial reporting back to people. Here's what's going on in your business. Here's what's going on. Here are some benchmarks you can look at. Here's what's going on with the cost structure. And in some cases, those are tools so that people can ask for more resources so that we can be nimble and thoughtful about, redeploying things, when the environment's changing. So support for growth is the priority, and making sure that, finance is a partner to the leaders around the business to help them make better decisions.
Daniel Bisgeier, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you very much. Nice speaking with you.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. We hope 2024 is treating you well. If you haven't already, we hope you'll pay a visit to CFOthoughtleader.com and go ahead and subscribe to our Mentoring Round newsletter, where we highlight the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our recent CFO guests. Also, LinkedIn users, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.